True freedom begins when you free yourself from the bonds of those who, out of fear or selfishness, try to keep you in what does not belong to you. Jung. Imagine dedicating so much of yourself to people who, in the end, seem not to recognize your true value. You sacrifice yourself, you deliver without reservations, you do everything you can to maintain harmony. But there comes a point when you realize that failure is coming, precisely of those who should be your pillars. Why does this happen? The problem lies with you. Or there is something much deeper and more mysterious behind this reality that hurts you in the depths of your being. Such Hyun said that within the collective unconscious, we load memories and repeating patterns, without us being able to consciously perceive them. Then, is your exclusion just a coincidence, or have you been chosen, although without knowing it, to break with something that has been perpetuated for generations? If you ever felt that no matter how much you did, you were never enough for those who should love you unconditionally, then you need to listen to what comes next. Family affection often has nothing to do with your flaws or failures, but with something much bigger than you. You represent your personal evolution, your way of seeing the world. Your emotional and mental independence may be perceived as a threat. For those who have never dared to step out of their comfort zone, is the fear of the unknown, silent envy, and above all, unconscious patterns rooted in the family system. Those who make those who should protect you be the first to walk away. Jung called this the shadow projection. Everything that a person denies in himself projects it onto others, and most shockingly, the more you try to prove your worth, the farther those people go, as if your light bothers those who have become too living in the dark. But there is something that no one tells you. That boy may be a sign that you no longer belong to the same cycle. You have grown, you have expanded your consciousness. You have broken paradigm like this without realizing it. You have crossed the invisible line that sustained the illusion of these ties. Many families do not accept those who defy employers, those who dare to think differently, or to question rules that have been imposed by generations. Fear of change causes them to attack before realizing that the problem was never you, but the transformation you represent. This explains why many of those who follow their own path end up feeling displaced in their own home. But the real question is, until when will you allow your pocket to define your value? If you feel that your own family does not accept you, perhaps it is time to understand what's really behind it, and even more important, decide how to react. It is worth continuing to seek acceptance where you will never find it, or the real power is in freeing you from that need. Jung claimed that the path to individualization, that is, to truly become who you are, demands that you forget about the bus chains, that you corrupt your own shadow and stop looking for external validation. Can be painful, but it is the only way to freedom. What you are about to discover now can completely change your perception of aging, even more transforming the way you see yourself. Imagine for a moment that those who should be your refuge, your strength against the storms of life, are actually the same ones that push you into the abyss. Feel the pain of being rejected, not because of strangers, but for those who carry your blood, who should be your greatest allies. Such pain is not common. It's not just the frustration of unrequited love, or the emptiness of a broken relationship. It is an invisible wound, a smile on the soul that never completely disappears. But today, I will reveal a truth to you that few dare to face. A truth that can change forever. The way you see your family. The most important thing, how you see yourself. From an early age, teach us to believe that family love is an unbreakable bond, that blood keeps us connected forever. But for many, this belief was in a brutal way. What for some is genuine love, for others it is a game of interests disguised as affection. Acceptance becomes conditional, an invisible contract where you are only valued while exceeding the expectations imposed, while you play the role they have designed for you. But the moment you dare to challenge that script, when you decide to walk your own way, and you free yourself from the prison of expectations, you become a stranger inside your own home. Carl Hayon said that the road to individualization needs to break with the illusions of the collective, and that includes blood ties that exists only on the surface. That follows. It is not just a disagreement or a passing conflict, is something much deeper and more primitive. Is the fear of what cannot be controlled. What happens when you stop fitting in? For some, estrangement occurs silently. Gradual disappearance, where your presence dissolves to become an uncomfortable memory. Others are more direct. You are eliminated from their lives with sharp words, deafening silences, and attitudes that hurt more than any visible wound. You find yourself alone, trapped in the labyrinth of doubt, wondering at what point everything went wrong. I will have changed too much. I will have made a mistake. But now listen carefully. This was never about your failure or failure. It was always about them. About his inability to accept something beyond his control. Jung called this projection. What we cannot stand in ourselves, we throw it on others. And that's exactly what happens. When a family rejects one of its own members, they do not reject you. Reject what you represent. Not all those who share your blood will also share your path. Some people will walk away because they can't stand to see someone break patterns, challenge silent rules, or question contradictions. That, deep down, they only perpetuate the suffering. But remember, you were not born to follow a script imposed by others. You were not born to be a reflection of what they expected of you. And that freedom, that refusal to be molded, is something few can stand. Sin embargo. The biggest mistake you can make is to abandon your essence, just to keep a place where you never belonged. Really, the big question is not why you are rejected, but because you are still seeking acceptance where there was never room for who you really are. You are ready to stop fighting for a conditioned love, and finally follow the path that has always been yours. True love should have no conditions. It should not be a chain that ties you to a piece of paper that you never chose to perform, when you refuse to be shaped by the expectations of others. This is often perceived as selfishness, but what these people really fear is not your independence. What scares them is that it no longer needs its approval to exist. Since we were born, we are molded to meet expectations, conditioned to value what they teach us and follow a path that we are told is the right one. Sin embargo. There comes a time when something inside us awakens. An internal whisper that tells us there is something else. That whisper is your essence, calling you out of the invisible prison that kept you captive. And it is at this moment that the real elections arise. Some people will admire your courage, will support you and celebrate your transformation. Others instead will attack you, will try to drag you back to your version of yourself that was easier to control, the one that did not question, that accepted everything without resistance, will use memories of the past, will try to convince you that just that old version of you deserves love and belonging. But the inevitable question arises. You turn off your light to fit the mold they created for you. You pretend to be someone you are not, just to maintain a love that was never recorded. Or you move on, aware that growing often means leave behind those who refuse to evolve with you. The cruelest part of this road is that leaving does not mean that love did not exist, or that you wouldn't want everything to be different. It simply means that you cannot betray yourself to maintain a bond that only exists at the expense of your own identity. There will be moments of doubt. The silence will be deafening, and the voices of the past will try to convince you that maybe it would have been easier to settle, submit, pretend everything was fine. But I ask you, what is the price of living a life that is not yours? How many years you can waste seeking acceptance of people who never wanted to see your true self? How many times will you have to become something you are not, to realize in the end that it will never be enough? Many people live trapped by the need for acceptance, sacrifice their authenticity, stifle their dreams, and become shadows of themselves, just to belong to a place that never wanted them. Really, but saddest thing is that they do not realize that this kind of love is not love, is control, and control disguised as affection is the most subtle and cruel form of manipulation. Whoever has felt this pain knows it. You are not wrong about choosing yourself. You are not wrong for refusing to be a prisoner of the expectations of others. Choosing yourself is the greatest act of courage there is. But growing up often means walking alone. And not everyone is ready to walk that road with you. Some people will stay behind, clinging to the image of who you were, unable to accept what you are becoming. Stick to your old version, because that version was predictable, easy to control, comfortable for them, but not. You can bear the burden of the limitations of others. Let them go, let them keep their own perceptions. And that's what they need to feel safe. But don't let that stop you from becoming the person you were born to be. Carl Jung said that the road to individualization demands courage to abandon the masks created by the collective, to break with the expectations projected upon us. His smile is not a reflection of your worth. Love, or the absence of it, does not define who you are. And the moment you really understand this, when you stop looking for love where it never existed, you will discover something extraordinary. You will find your real family. That which is not bound by blood, but for the election. A bond created by respect, reciprocity, and genuine love that asks for nothing in return. Just be who you really are. If you are trapped in this crucial point, clinging to the past, in the hope that someday everything will change, then I need to ask you, and if the love you seek so much is not behind you, but in front of you, and if everything you want is already waiting for you to have the courage to take the next step. The fear of release can be overwhelming, because we have been conditioned to believe that maintain links, even Argentines, is an obligation. But there is a much greater weight than releasing. To continue to hold something that no longer belongs to you, there comes a time in life in which the only possible option is to move forward. Do not look back, not to try to rebuild what has already. Do not beg, so that those who do not want to change are different. You must decide. You continue to carry a weight that was never yours, or you finally break free. And that liberation begins with an uncomfortable truth, but necessary. The way people treat you says more about them than about you. Coldness, the desert, silence, none of that reflects your value. But the limitations of those who cast their shadows on you. For years you thought the problem was in you. That maybe if you were more complacent, more obedient, more like what they wanted, then you would be accepted. Recognize, beloved. But that's just an illusion. If love is to be won through submission, then it is not love. If acceptance only exists when you reduce your light to fit into someone else's world, then that is not acceptance. Ease, control. Jung claimed that many live trapped within archetypes, who never chose, prisoners of family roles that suffocate them. But not you. You must continue to play a role that was never yours. The problem is that for too long, we have confused control with affection. We were taught that to be loved means to give in, sacrificing parts of ourselves so as not to get sick, so as not to destabilize the established. But true love does not demand that you become small, does not punish your evolution, does not penalize your growth, and yet your freedom will be seen as a threat. For those who do not know how to be free, your independence forces them to confront their own incarceration. Your courage confronts them with their cowardice. Your evolution highlights how stagnant they have remained. And since they are not prepared to face this truth, choose to stay away, not because you are not worthy of love, but because they do not know how to love someone who refuses to be molded. For so long, you tried to justify that estrangement. You created excuses for those who hurt you. You clung to the hope that if you tried a little harder, if you gave more love, if you waited with patience, maybe things would change. But now, what's so noble about begging to be seen? Where the honor lies in trying to demonstrate your value to those who have already decided not to see you. True love does not need to be conquered. Who really loves you does not measure his affection as a bargaining chip. He who loves you does not make you beg for attention. And the moment you understand this, you will become untouchable. The instant you stop looking for validation, of those who only know how to retain. You will regain a power that has always been yours. So now, look in the mirror and see who you really are. You never needed anyone's approval to exist, to be loved, to be complete. You were conditioned to look for love in places where he should never have been, to measure your value with the eyes of those who never knew how to see you for real. Now the time has come to release you from that weight, to stop seeking acceptance in closed volumes, because true love does not require you to become less of who you really are. True love does not imprison. No manipulation, does not demand constant sacrifices in exchange for us. Is simply, and you deserve a love that doesn't ask you to change, that does not bind you to expectations that were never yours. You don't have to be more or less to fit into no one's world. You don't have to hide your light to make others feel comfortable. You don't have to apologize for being who you are. There is immense freedom to let go, in understanding that you don't need to hold on to people that never knew how to support you. True love is not really a test of where you sacrifice yourself only to receive a minimum of recognition. True love does not make you fight for a space that should be yours. By right builds a new space, a place where you are welcome simply because you exist. And now the choice is before you, to continue to bear the weight of a conditional love, or finally let go of the chains and hug the one you were born to be. This is where your true redemption lies, not in its acceptance, but in yours. Not in the recognition you tirelessly sought, but in the way you see yourself when the world around you is silent, when all that remains is you with yourself, without the need to justify your existence, nor demonstrate your value. When you finally understand, without hesitation, you are never the problem. Carl Jung said that the real awakening occurs when we stop looking for external validation and we look inward, recognizing that our journey has always been lonely, but never without purpose. Some will call you selfish. They will say you have become cold, ungrateful, that you walked away out of pride. Will try to drag you back into submission, remembering the moments when they were present. But love is not a debt. Love should not be a burden of guilt. Genuine love is given freely, without requirements, without chains. If it came with ties, then it was never love. It was only control disguised as affection, and it is in this understanding that your true power is revealed. You owe no explanation to anyone for the space you occupy in this world. You don't need to lean to make others feel taller. The only approval that really matters is yours. And then you get up and move on. Not with rancor, but clearly. Not with anger, but with understanding. Some people will never be able to love you as you are, and that is their loss. Know yours. Some will never accept your truth, but that doesn't make it any less true. You did not come to this world to fit the expectations of others. You were not molded to live inside a box, surrounded by trembling hands of fear. You were born to free yourself, to expand without, to grow without needing anyone's permission. And the day you stop looking for what should have happened, you will freely realize something extraordinary. You were never looking for his love. You were always looking for yours. And when that moment comes, the illusion dissolves. You see for the first time that you have never been alone. The true sense of belonging does not come from harming others, but to completely accept yourself. When you choose yourself, a new path opens up, not because someone has granted you permission, but because you finally decided to allow it. You were measured by the expectations of others. You shaped your voice, your choices, your own being to fit in a mold that never belonged to you. You followed rules that weren't yours. You played a role you never chose. But now the time has come to ask you, do you want to be accepted or do you want to be free? The search for acceptance can be a cruel trap. You spend a lifetime believing that if you do everything right, you will finally receive the love and validation you long for. But there is something brutally hidden in pursuing approval of those who have already decided not to give it to you. No matter how much you sacrifice yourself, how off you become, will always demand more. You could spend decades bending, becoming the most convenient version for them, just to realize that acceptance was always an illusion, a game of impossible expectations. The problem was never you. The problem was always his inability to see beyond the projections they created. And if an inevitable moment comes, the choice between continuing to grow, leaving what was never whole, or finally release and move on. The illusion says that if you try a little harder, they will change. Then one more sacrifice, a little more obedience will. But that promise is empty. The truth, no matter how painful it may be, is that your approval was never something you could gain, was always conditional, playing with one hand and retreating with the other. And when you understand this, you stop the impossible. You stop waiting. You stop becoming small to fit into spaces that were never yours. Because your courage does not depend on them choosing you. Your value is not in the ability of others to recognize you. You are not born to be tolerated, to be just enough not to get sick. You were born to be complete, to be free. This choice will not be easy. The road to freedom never is. There will be moments of doubt, of silence, of pain for which it never occurred in the authentic way. But something literally happens on the other side of loneliness. You find freedom. The freedom to know that you do not owe your obedience, your silence, or your suffering to anyone. The freedom to stop begging for a place at the table and instead build your own. And when you do this, something even more powerful will happen. You will find those that you were never asked to become small. People who do not see your strength as a threat. People who do not use love as a bargaining chip. You will find your real family, not bound by blood, but for the election, out of respect, for free and unconditional love. Because family is not the only one who shares your name. Family is the one who stays when everyone else leaves, who chooses to be by your side, not out of obligation, but because he wants to do it without conditions, without requirements, without the need for you to transform yourself into something you are not. Family is the one who celebrates your growth instead of fearing it, who does not feel threatened by your evolution, but applaud your achievements with genuine happiness, who doesn't need you to shrink to feel bigger. Some of the connections, deepest and truest of your life, will not come from the blood, but of souls who see you for what you really are, and they love you precisely for that reason. But for that to happen, you must be willing to let go, to liberate those who do not know how to love without imposing conditions, to distance yourself from those who see your existence as a nuisance, to stop fighting for a love that was never free. Do it not with rancor, not with anger, but with the clarity that you deserve more. And then comes the inevitable moment. You finally wake up, but not because they decided to accept you, nor because they recognized your value, nor because they were disappointed or changed their view of you. You wake up because for the first time, you see your own value with your own eyes. You no longer need permission to exist, to be loved, to be sufficient. You do not stand up as someone who is still waiting to be welcomed, but as someone who understood that true love was never something you should beg for. You do not carry hate. You don't take revenge. You walk with peace, with the certainty that those who did not know how to love you were never to be part of the life you are building. You do not belong to the past. You do not belong to the limitations that tried to impose on you. You belong to yourself. And by embracing this truth, something deep reveals itself. You have never been lost. You were never broken. You were always complete. You were always enough, and now you are finally free. If there is one thing you should take away from this moment, it is this: you were never the black sheep. You were always the lion. But they feared the day you would find out. Feared the moment when they would finally. You would understand that you don't need to get sick from acceptance. That you don't need to reduce yourself to fit into the rigid molds they created for you. That you do not need to continue a battle that was never yours. So go away and never turn off your light again. Never again ask permission to shine. Never again try to convince someone to love what already is, by valuable essence. Now close your eyes for a moment. Imagine walking down a narrow path, leaving behind the weight of expectations, of the requirements, of failed attempts to be accepted by those who never knew how to welcome you. Really, at every turn, you feel the freedom growing inside you, as if you can finally breathe without fear, without guilt, without the need to prove anything to anyone. Now, visualize expressions of people who love you just the way you are, without requirements, without conditions, without the need for you to mold to please them. This is not a distant dream. This is the life that awaits you. The instant you choose yourself, the moment you stop seeking acceptance in places where there was never any space for who you really are. And if this message touched anything deep in you, like this video and subscribe to the channel, because now the road is already open and was always inside you.